This is one country I barely have to introduce you to. Let's just get it over with. Sushi, geishas, karate, temples, ramen, anime, sumos, weird stuff, weird cosplay, poison fish, and I'm not even gonna ask about that.
So much culture.
Ikimashou.
He speaks Japanese.
Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. We have reached the land of the rising sun, Asia's island powerhouse, and home to a culture that I'm sure you've heard of. Let's just jump into it. Japan, you have such a story behind you. First of all, Japan is located right off the east coast of the Asian continent between the Pacific Ocean and the Sea of Japan, stretching all the way from the Sea of Okhotsk in the north with the East China Sea to the south. The country
East China Sea. Sea of the Okhotsk. Okhotsk. How is it pronounced?
is divided into 47 prefectures, each
Prefectures. What is that? In certain countries, a district under the authority of a prefect or governor. Is it like province? Tell me if you know.
with incredibly in the north with the East China Sea to the south. The country is divided into 47 prefectures, each with incredibly beautifully minimalistic style flags. The prefectures are divided.
Oh, yeah, these are really modern looking logos or flags.
Divided into 4 different categories: Ken, To, Fu, and Do. The first level, Ken, Ken, refers to the 43 plain prefectures. Then you have To, which means something like metropolis, and this category only applies to Tokyo City. Fu refers to the urban prefectures, which applies only to the cities of Osaka and Kyoto. And finally, Do, which is a unique category translating to something like circuit, and it applies to all of Hokkaido in the north.
Why are the districts divided into 4 sections? Why did they do that?
Japan's capital is the largest city in the world with its greater metropolitan area.
Tokyo is the largest city in the world? Really? I had no idea.
Speaking of which, Tokyo, Japan's capital, is the largest city in the world with its greater metropolitan area, including Kanto, containing about 37 million people. That's
37 million people in one city? Are you kidding me? How big is the city though? It must be so dense.
The entire population of Canada. However, Tokyo
what?
Containing about 37 million people. That's more than the entire population of Canada. However,
no way. What is the entire population of Canada? Really? My goodness, I had no idea.
However, Tokyo is kind of like 23 smaller cities all smashed into one, divided into units called wards. And the closest thing to a capital one would probably be Chiyoda, where the emperor, prime minister, and supreme court are located. After the greater Tokyo Kanto
Japan still has an emperor.
Region, you have the next largest cities, Osaka and Nagoya, coming in at third. Keep in mind, about 90% of people in Japan live in cities, and the vast majority on Honshu and Kyushu. The busiest airports, of course, being Tokyo's 2 twins, Haneda, which is actually in Tokyo, and Narita International, which is like an hour-and-a-half drive away outside of Tokyo. Then you have Osaka's Kansai International, kicks, and Fukuoka Internet away outside of Tokyo. Then you have Osaka's Kansai International, kicks, and Fukuoka International on Kyushu. Gotta keep it clean, Keith. Speaking of which, Japan is made up of about 6,850 islands, but about 97% of the
6,000, almost 7,000 islands. My God.
Land is made up of 4 main islands: Honshu, Kyushu, Shikoku, and Hokkaido. South of the main 4, you have the Ryukyu island chain, which extends just south of Kyushu, partially making up the Okinawa prefecture. You've probably heard of Okinawa. It's where Uma Thurman got that
I've never heard of it.
That sword that she used to kill Lucy Liu. It's also where these 2 islands never mind.
I'm very unfamiliar with Japan, unfortunately, but I really like to watch videos about Japan because it's so new to me and I feel like I'm learning a lot.
Japan can still kind of be separated into 10 historical main regions, 6 of which divided amongst Honshu. Then you have the interesting
so many divisions, my God. I will never remember them.
Highlighted Kuro Island dispute with Russia in the north. Basically, Russia and Honshu. Then you have the interesting less highlighted Kuro Island dispute with Russia in the north. Basically, Russia administers all of them, but Japan claims these two islands closest to Hokkaido, Iturup or Etorofuto, and Kunashir or Kunashiri, which is only like less than 10 miles away from Hokkaido. On a clear day, you can even see it from the coast, but it's like, nope, Russia. They even have a statue of Lenin. The Russians and Japanese have kind of had a long dispute over this area. At one point, Japan even tried to take over all of Sakhalin in the 1800s. Then you have the Dokdo.
Well, which people live there? Russians or Japanese?
Takashima Island dispute between them and South Korea. To this day, South Korea has a patrol building built on the island and they fiercely guard it. And finally, you have Okinotorishima, which is probably the loneliest place in Japan as a shallow reef in the middle of the ocean. It looks like it's trying so hard to become
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. What is it?
The loneliest place in Japan as a shallow fiercely guarded. And finally, you have Okinotorishima, which is probably the loneliest place in Japan as a shallow reef in the middle of the ocean. It looks like it's trying so hard to become an island, complete with 3 helipads and a research station. There's no diplomatic dispute, but rather a dispute within the UN on whether or not it qualifies as land for an exclusive economic zone in the ocean. Phew, okay, all right, that kind of took forever. Getting around to Japan is incredibly easy, often touted as having the best public transportation system in the world. They have highways and trains everywhere, even one that cuts through an office building, as well.
That's fascinating. What? Doesn't it make a lot of noise when it's just passing through the building? Imagine working in that building.
Through an office building, as well as the Shinkansen bullet train system.
Whoa, yeah.
System that can get you to virtually every corner of Honshu and Kyushu, as well as the bottom tip of Hokkaido, but not Shikoku. If you want to go to Shikoku, you have to take the slower local Seto Ohashi line across the Seto Bridge. Yeah, Shikoku is kind of like the runt of the litter in Japan. Basically, Japan is like one big massive machine, constantly running and moving with flashy neon lights, vending machines, and robots, and everything. Everything! Even the garbage cans have cartoons.
Oh, yeah. That's so cute, though.
Everywhere. Anyway, some notable places of interest might include Tokyo Skytree, the second tallest building in the world, Miyajima Pagoda.
Oh, is it the second?
Possible places of interest might include Tokyo Skytree, the second tallest building in the world.
Really?
Miyajima Pagoda.
The first one is, I assume it's in Dubai. The Burj of Khalif or something?
Matsumoto, Himeji, and Osaka castles, the Fushimi Inari Shrine, the Great Buddha Hall, Nakagin Capsule Tower, the Vine Bridges of Iya Valley, the Ramen Museum. So many weird themed restaurant
Whoa, that was
Nakagin
beautiful.
Capsule Tower, the Vine Bridges of Iya Valley, the Ramen Museum.
Look at the sky. What is it? That's not real, is it? That's a museum, of course. It's not real. But it's beautiful.
So many weird themed restaurants and hot springs.
Oh, that was
Tower,
restaurants?
the Vine Bridges of Iya Valley,
It looked
the
like
Ramen
prison.
Museum. So many weird themed restaurants and hot springs. The self-mummified monks of Sokushin Butsu. That hotel run by robots. The ninja...
Oh my god, really?
And hot springs. The self-mummified monks of Sokushin Butsu. That hotel run by robots. The Ninja Museum in Iga. Kanmangafuchi Lava Buddhas. The restricted access Ise Grand Shrine, the most significant of all Shinto shrines. The Shirakawa Go traditional village, armed with water cannons to protect itself from fires. Abandoned theme parks like Greenland and Nara Dreamland. Kochiya Hill with red cypress. And the national treasure, Itsukushima Shrine, featured on numerous pieces of art, films, and even banknotes. Now, despite the bustling metropolis regions and skyscrapers, Japan does an incredible job at maintaining its natural integrity. Find out how. Now, Japan's land is kind of like a gingerbread house. Beautiful on the outside, but potentially dangerous on the inside. First of all, Japan is a stratovolcanic archipelago located right on the most precariously situated section.
You always hear on the news, volcano in Japan, earthquake in Japan.
Major tectonic plates converge: the Pacific, the Philippine, the Eurasian, and the North American plates. Of course, this means that not only is Japan subject to earthquakes, but also tsunamis, which, by the way, is a Japanese word, tsunami, caused from sub-oceanic activities such as the one recently in Fukushima caused by the epicenter in the Japan Trench off the Pacific. This also means that Japan is a volcanic area with numerous volcanoes still active, like Aogashima, a volcano within a volcano, Mount Aso, the
volcano within a volcano.
This in return also blesses Japan with countless natural hot springs, which they like to exploit and build bathhouses on, called onsen, typically indicated with this symbol. All this plate activity in volcanoes means that about 70% of Japan is mountainous, with the highest peak, Mount Fuji, overlooking Tokyo, which, by the way, is still technically an active volcano, which erupted about 300 years ago. The rift between the Philippine plate and the Eurasian plate creates the Japanese Alps, which bisects the country on Honshu. This isolated geologic war zone, in return, though, kind of blesses Japan with an abundance of unique flora and fauna. Today, about 70% of Japan is forested with nice natural water sources, like the longest river, the Shinano, and the largest lake, Lake Biwa on Honshu. Endemic animals can be found, like Japanese hornets, macaque monks,
that was huge.
Endemic animals can be found, like Japanese...
Oh my god. I get goosebumps when I see like bugs and stuff. Bugs, not bugs, but I mean insects.
Japanese hornets, macaque monkeys,
Look at this. Oh, look at the baby. Oh,
tanukis, giant salamanders, bobtail cat, sero, red fox, red crowned crane, the national dog, the Shiba Inu, the national bird, the green pheasant, and the national fish, koi. Speaking of animals, Japan has quite a few feral animal islands and towns, such as Tashirojima, the cat island, Okunoshima, the rabbit island, the town of Miyajima for deer, Miyagizao for foxes, and of course Jigoku Dani, where you
look
can
at
see
them. I want to be them.
monkeys and
At
hot
this
springs.
point.
With limited space and only about 20% highly subsidized arable land, Japan has kind of had to think outside the box. So they said, hey, why not go to the sea? Today, Japan is disputably the most advanced aquaculture society on the planet. Not only do they
Really?
have the largest merchant marine fleet in the world, but they also
Wow.
harvest everything from shellfish to seaweed in offshore ocean plots and fish farms. They love fish. They even have the largest fish market in the world, Tsukiji. Speaking of which,
Really?
we all know about Japanese food. I feel like I don't even really have to give you a list of notable dishes like sushi, mochi, or ramen. However, Japan is known for making strange flavors of conventional snacks, drinks, and desserts, such as yogurt Pepsi,
Yogurt Pepsi?
for
What
making
is that?
strange flavors of conventional snacks, drinks, and desserts, such as yogurt
Is that like the Turkish ayran? I think it's called ayran, right?
Pepsi, spaghetti popsicles, horse and octopus ice cream, pancake juice, wasp crackers,
I
and
want-
Kit Kat has tried pretty much
oh,
anything
no.
under the sun.
I want to try most of them, but not all of them.
Speaking of which, Japan is the third largest world economy by nominal GDP, mostly due to their
My God.
various technology and automotive industries
And they experienced 2 world wars.
that have swept over the world by storm since the middle of the 20th century. The largest automotive companies include Toyota, Mitsubishi, Honda, Nissan, Mazda, Suzuki, and Subaru, as well as
I would love to know what is it that makes Japan so good? How did they recover so good from the war? It's amazing to me. It's fascinating.
companies and their subsidiaries like Hitachi, Sony, Epson, Canon, Toshiba, Fujitsu, Panasonic, Nikon, and
I
Nintendo.
know almost all of them.
This does, however, cause a problem. Japan is classified as a high throwaway society in which lots of resources get unnecessarily used and tossed. Like, come on, Japan, I know you have aesthetic standards, but seriously, I don't need one apple in vacuum sealed plastic wrap. Nonetheless, Japan is often seen as one of, if not the world leader in robotics and tech science, receiving more Nobel Prizes in science than any other Asian country. And it's kind of impressive. I mean, with a high population and limited space, Japanese people know how to consolidate and innovate. Speaking of Japanese people, now, Japanese people are like, you never know what they're going to come up with next. You know it's probably going to be a little weird, but you're still going to be a little interested in it. First of all, the country has about 127 million people and is the 10th most populous country in the world. However, Mexico is getting really close to beating them. The country is incredibly homogenous, with over 98% of the populace identifying as ethnically Japanese, while
That's interesting.
the remainder is mostly made up of Koreans, Chinese, and very small Caucasian minorities of Americans and Europeans, and the indigenous Ryukyu and Ainu peoples. They use the Japanese
Maybe it's the homogeneity that causes them to work so hard for the development of their country. But, a lot of countries are very homogeneous in terms of their population.
again as their
But they don't have the development of Japan.
currency, they surprisingly use the Type A American-style plug outlet, and they drive on the left side of the road. As mentioned, like 8 seconds ago, Japan has 2 main indigenous ethnic groups, each with their own languages. You have the Ainu, which predominantly inhabit Hokkaido and some of the Kuril Islands administered by Russia, known for their rustic, scruffy features where men grew beards and women used to tattoo their lips and arms. Today, they're
Why?
known for their rustic, scruffy features where men grew beards and women used to tattoo their lips and arms. Today, there are less than 30,000 left, but some estimate that there could be up to 200,000 if you include the other Ainu that have assimilated into the rest of Japan and are kind of faintly aware of their own culture. Otherwise, you have the Ryukyu people, or the Okinawans, which are kind of like the Hawaiians of Japan, known for their own distinct art and traditions and beliefs. Now, everybody in the world has had at least a little bit of exposure to some kind of Japanese culture, whether it be samurais,
Mine was the anime Captain Tsubasa. I don't think many of you would know it. It was about a young football player who basically wanted to become a professional football player, and you could see his development, the process he went through to become a professional football player, and he went eventually to the Japan's national team and he played there, and I think he won the World Cup. I couldn't watch the whole episode, like all of the episodes, but I loved this anime. I love football. That's why it was like my number one cartoon to watch.
Geishas, sumos, kabuki, shamisen music, kimonos, and excessively weird products and advertisements aimed at using non-conformity as a hook to engage viewers. But apart from all that flashy Japan stuff, let's look at the basics first. Japan, no surprise, speaks Japanese, which is actually not that hard to learn conversationally, but it's a nightmare when it comes to writing. The Japanese language uses 3 alphabets: hiragana, katakana, and kanji.
3 alphabets? Do you have to learn all of them?
Technically 4 if you include Romaji, but that's kind of like for lazy people. The first 2, hiragana and katakana, are syllabaries made up of 46 corresponding base characters each. That means you have 2 ways to write each syllable, whereas kanji is basically the list of Chinese characters that they borrowed from China. Most students have to learn about 2,000 to 3,000 of these. That means that Chinese people can kind of get by in Japan just by reading the signs, as most of the characters have identical meanings, just different pronunciations. It's kind of hard to explain, but the reason why they use 3 alphabets is because each one kind of plays a role for certain words in context. They don't use spaces in writing, so each alphabet kind of acts as like word dividers, and katakana is used for technical and foreign words. Well, why don't they just fix the problem by using spaces and discard the other 2 alphabets? Shut up! That's why. If you didn't grow up here...
Yeah.
actually learn this stuff, you're either obsessed with Japan or criminally insane. Sorry, I'm boring the crap out of you guys with language stuff. Anyway, let's talk about history. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen that video by Bill Words, whom
I watched it, yeah.
I am totally not jealous of, considering that he racked up more views and subscribers in 2 videos than I have in all these years of working on this channel. But the quickest way I can summarize it: Yayoi period, Kofun period, Yamato's unite Japan, Asuka regime, Chinese culture comes in, Heian period, aristocrats take over, Kamakura period, aristocrats lose, Shogun time, province wars, Azuchi Momoyama period, things are stable, Meiji restoration, industrialization, World War I, Japan's economy sucks, coup d'etats and assassination attempts against the emperor, military rule, they try to make an empire, and in World War II attack Pearl Harbor, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Afterwards, treaties signed, military kind of dismantled, and post-war economic miracle. Done! Japan definitely sticks out from every country on Earth, and it's partially because of their belief system. Japan is the only country in the world that practices Shintoism, which obviously enough started in Japan. If you don't know anything about Shintoism, basically it's a very ritualistic belief system that reveres a multitude of kami, which translates to something along the lines of gods or spirits or essence. It's hard.
What I... Can someone explain a little bit about this Shintoism?
Of kami, which translates to something along the lines of gods or spirits or essence. It's hard.
So they believe in a god, right? Can someone describe their god?
To explain, but basically a kami can be manifested in almost anything and everything. There are kami for harvest, kami for war, kami for good luck, and so on. Today, about 80% of Japanese people practice Shinto to some extent, whether it be going to temples or shrines and lighting incense and praying. However, most of them will not say that they identify as Shintoists, since there are no formal rituals to deem yourself a practitioner. Otherwise, about 35% might say that they identify as Buddhist, and a small 3% are Christians. Today, there are about 81,000 Shinto shrines and about 85,000 appointed Shinto priests all over the country. Technically, Shintoism is also important because it's claimed that the emperor is a direct descendant of Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, which means the emperor has the highest authority in Shintoism. Though today it's more seen as like a moral tradition and patriotic practice rather than believing that the emperor actually has divine status. Oh yeah, and Japan has an imperial family with Akihito holding the throne since 1989, and to this day Japan is the only country with an emperor. Some people
It's the only one left. That's interesting.
Say that Shintoism is partially the reason why Japan also has a vibrant, complex industry of cartoons and anime, many of which inspired from Shinto-driven legends and kami. They often rank as the top video game producing and playing country in the world. Everybody knows Mario, Sonic, and Pikachu. In a sense, Japanese people have always admittedly kind of been escapists, creating their own worlds, and it might be due to their long history of diplomatic isolation. In another sense,
that's interesting.
Though honor and diligence culture is of huge importance, having a degree of diplomatic isolation. In another sense, though, honor and diligence culture is of huge importance, having a degree and respectable title is always flaunted. The problem, though, is that Japan has the largest aging population in the world.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Over 26% of the country is 65 or older. In contrast, only about 12.4% are 1 to 14 years old. Sociologists have many theories as to why this is, but in addition to a high depression rate, there seems to be a lack.
Japan has high depression rates? I wonder what's the cause of it.
of sexual interest amongst millennials.
What?
Why this is, but in addition to a high depression rate, there seems to be a lack of sexual interest amongst millennials. Especially for men. They even have a word for it, soshoku danshi, or herbivores. On top of that, Japan has a... Especially for men, they even have a word for it, soshoku danshi, or herbivores. On top of
What's the cause of it?
that, Japan has a very strict and conservative approach towards immigration and citizenship. So ultimately, a smaller generation has to lift the burden of taking care of a population almost 10 times their size. Many Japanese people are overworked. They even have a word for that, karoshi. Some almost 10 times their size. Many Japanese people are overworked.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Also, I've heard that a lot of people in South Korea are overworked. Sometimes they even pass out in the street because they worked so much. I don't know if it's true, but I mean, one of my close friends told me that she was living in South Korea for a couple of months, and she said that to me, which is crazy.
They even have a word for that, karoshi. Some wonder how the future will look like.
Hey, son, can you help me cross the street?
Ooh, I would, but you never had a son, so I don't exist. Good luck! Now you can probably understand why the Japanese are so into building robots. There's so much more we could talk about, like how Japan has a strong history in martial arts, folklore, and regional festivals, but this video is already getting long and I have to cut it down. Some notable people of Japanese descent might include people like Emperor Hirohito, Fukuzawa Yukichi, Honda Tatakatsu, Kukai, Maeda Toshie.
I know Kukai. I remember that from the Billboards video. I watched it. It's in my channel. You can watch it if you want to.
Murasaki Shikibu, Saifo Takamori, Akira Kurosawa, Hayao Miyazaki.
Ah, this guy, he's...
Murasaki Shikibu, Saifo Takamori, Akira Kurosawa, Hayao
I think he's a director. Like he's an anime director or drawer.
Miyazaki, Soichiro Honda, Miyoshi Umeki, Hibari Misora, Rinko Kikuchi, Osamu Danzai, Kei Nishikori, Ayumi Hamasaki, Takeshi Hitano, Masayoshi Son, Akira Toriyama, Sadako Ogata, Taiho Koki, Masako Katsura, Ichiro Suzuki, Hane Mori, Ken Watanabe, Downtown Duo, Kisuke Honda, and Shinji
I know him. I also know him.
Kagawa.
Football
Now,
players.
History, Japan has always kind of been like a lone wolf, but over time they learned how to open up. And let's find out how in the last segment. So Japan is a pretty big player on the world stage. As a member of the G20, G8, IMF, WHO, UN, EAS, Interpol, and like 400 other acronyms, they know diplomacy pretty well. They get along with Brazil, Peru, and the Philippines pretty well, as each country contains many Japanese communities. In addition, lots of
Really?
people from these countries either visit or work in Japan. Peru even had a Japanese president. As mentioned in the France episode, these countries
What?
either visit or work in Japan. Peru even had
Peru had even a Japanese president? How is that even possible? I should learn about Peru now. I'm so curious. How did this happen?
a Japanese president. As mentioned in the France episode, Japan kind of sees France as like the epitome of European exoticism. And after English, French is one of the most highly desired languages to learn, although good luck considering how every French word kind of ends in a consonant. The Pacific Island nations of Palau, Kiribati, and Marshall Islands still hold close ties, even though Japan kind of occupied them during the first half of the 20th century. Japanese people love visiting and provide business and revenue for these countries. Their biggest frenemies are South Korea and China. These three are like the Asian trifecta, dominating most of the business and affairs in the East. Despite Japan having invaded and occupying these two for decades, my own grandmother was actually raised in Japanese-occupied Korea, and to this day she still speaks fluent Japanese. They've mostly moved on, plus the whole North Korea thing kind of makes South Korea and Japan closer. The youth of today love piggybacking off of each other's cultures. Koreans and Japanese admit it, they can't get enough of Japanese anime and video games, whereas the Japanese are obsessed with K-pop and, you know,
Oh, really?
they kind of got kanji and Buddhism from China.
I'm also so unfamiliar with K-pop. Maybe I should get into it.
So there's that. In terms of their best friends, however, interestingly enough, though, most of the Japanese...
I also haven't watched any anime other than that's the one that I told you that I watched when I was a kid. Captain Tsubasa. Oh, it was amazing. I would even watch it again.
People I've talked to have said the USA and Taiwan. Even though they don't officially recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state, on paper, they totally act like they do and stand with them on pretty much any diplomatic measure. Taiwan was actually the longest lasting occupied area under Japanese rule during the Empire years, and they have since then still kept close. Even though the pains of World War II will never be forgotten, it's funny because almost immediately after that, the US and Japan started skipping down the street hand in hand. The US kind of felt like a duty to make reparations since they were already communities of Japanese Americans, especially in Hawaii and California. My hometown, Los Angeles, has a little Tokyo. So they invested tons of money in Japan after the war, and in the 50s, Japan started booming in every industry. Culture cues were adopted on both sides. McDonald's opened up in Tokyo, 7-Eleven opened up in the US. They love burgers and Chris Evans, and we have nerds living in their mom's basements rewatching every season of Naruto Shippuden with ill-fitting cosplay outfits. In conclusion, the land of the rising sun has always kind of figured that the best way for them to open up to the world was to create their own worlds with wild imaginations driven by technology, yet still beautifully preserving the ancient, vibrant values of their ancestors. Oh, and by the way, this episode was brought to you by Bob Saget's Bear Shark Tippus coffee shoes. Watashi wa kohito kutsu ga hoshi. Let's super harassment sandwich. Stay tuned. Jordan is coming up next.
That was interesting, guys. I would love to learn more about Japan and also other countries. If you know any other geography, or more importantly for me, historical YouTube channels or YouTube videos, I would appreciate if you let me know in the comments. And also, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like and also subscribe to my channel. It would give me a lot of energy to make more of these videos. Thank you very much for watching this with me. I hope to see you in the next one.